The next component we're going to be looking into is camera movement. The first step we're going to do is actually just do a basic camera move with keyframes inside of the sequencer. And the sequencer is like a timeline. You've seen it before in the other modules. It's like a timeline that resembles, those of your editing softwares. So we can kind of place a keyframe of pretty much any detail within the camera panel. And I'll show you how to do all that in just a second. In this module, what we're going to do first is we're going to just do a small little push in with our first camera onto Ziva. So go ahead and load up Module 8, and let's load up our Module 8 cinematic. So here we are. You'll see that there's a couple cameras already keyframed that we're going to work our way towards all that. And if you just wanted to take a look at our sequence and what we have going on here, you can. I can go ahead and take a look at what we've done with our shots here. If I scroll through the sequence, you'll see I've done a couple camera moves with both cameras and actually our wide shot as well. And so let's go ahead and mute our wall as we always do. Up here, unmute, and you'll see that we have a little push in on our wide shot as well. So let's take a look at what that looks like, and then we'll recreate it. So in order to do that, we can go ahead and click this camera icon right here, and that'll possess our shots that are inside of this camera cut track right here. So all the shots that we've laid out will then be shown when that cut happens. So let's go ahead and take a look. Let's switch back to our cinematic viewport. If it already isn't, we can click those back on and off. Okay, so I'm going to hit play. And to hit play, you can either hit this button here or spacebar. And we have a nice little push in, rack focus in on our wide shot. It's going to cut to this Ziva push in / rotation around her. And then we have a small little move on Trey as well. So very simple. And we're going to work our way towards that right now. So first thing we want to do is we're going to create a new sequence. So let's come up here to the Cinematics tab, and let's add a new level sequence. We're going to rename it, but we're going to place it in you go to the interior VC, intro VC folder. We can look for sequences, main, and we're going to just add our new module 8. Module _8 V2. For the time being. And you'll see that we have a brand new sequence with no keyframes, no anything. In fact, if you hit play, nothing happens, right? Because there's nothing there. Let's switch our frame rate to 24 frames per second just to keep things as filmic and cinematic as possible. And let's start by keyframing our first move. So we'll take our close-up Ziva shot, and we're going to go ahead and possess that really quick. Take a look. If this happens, that means we're not looking through the camera view. We're looking through the camera frame more or less, but not the view. So you'll want to hit this button right here, and then boom, we're right into it. So we're taking a look at that, and we're going to click over here on the world outliner, and we're going to grab our close-up Ziva, drag it into our sequence. You'll notice that the camera cut has already been placed automatically for that specific camera. It's totally fine. We can leave it at that. Before we move on, I want to make sure we have more frames, more length of time in our sequence so we can play with our shots a little bit more. So let's go ahead and make it a longer sequence. So you'll see right now we're at 120 frames. And if you come up here and make sure you're in the cinematic viewport, you can actually make this longer. So let's go ahead and type 500. And now we've made our sequence 500 frames long. You can go ahead and leave this as is for now. So we have a 500 frame long sequence. That's good for the starting point. And we're going to go ahead and keyframe our first camera move. So how do we do that? So first thing we're going to want to do, you already see that we have some default settings down here that can be keyframed. That's this little button right here, this little plus button, as well as the transform values as well. So we can keyframe any of those. For now, we're going to go ahead and hit S, and what that does is it just adds a keyframe for all the transform values. So go ahead and hit S, and that you'll see these orange circles right here. That means that that's a keyframe that's there in our sequence, and that's marking the position in which the camera is in right now. So we can go all the way to our final frame here, and if we want to just hit this button right here, this middle orange number here will put your cursor where you want it. So let's go 500 to go to the end. And let's go ahead and pilot our camera. Now we can right click and move the camera around to find our end frame. And let's just say we want to do something. We kind of want to end a little frontal and pretty close. Let's go right in that vicinity and go ahead and hit S again. Make sure we're on the sequence. And I did I hit S? Yes, I did. We just can't see it. There we go. There's our second keyframe. So now if we scroll through, you'll see that we have a camera move. And you can hit play or spacebar, and we'll see a very slow, subtle push into Ziva here. Let's just say she, in the script that this character has something important to say. This might be a good moment to push in and really kind of like subconsciously tell the audience that this is an important moment. So there you go. There you have it. We have our first little camera move. Well done. Now what we can do is we can add a second camera move to some of our other cameras, and we're going to go ahead and do that right now. So let's go ahead and do that like slight push in and slight rack focus with our wide shot that we saw earlier. So go ahead and grab your wide camera here, click and drag, and here we go. We have our wide shot now. It's in the sequence. We can start keyframing it. A quick way to kind of pilot it is also just to hit this. So don't hit this camera. This will lock your viewport to just what's in the camera cuts. So you'll see that as the second we move away from this cut, we're out of the camera view. So what you'll want to do, and that locks it. You can't, if you try to pilot this with the right click on your mouse, it won't do anything. But we can possess the wide shot by just hitting this button right here. Boom. And here we are. We're in the wide shot. Let's go make sure we're out of that. Deselected that. Okay. And what we're going to do here, same thing, very subtle push. And maybe we start a little further back. And I'm going to just show you another way to do this keyframing here. So if we go to our transform tab here on the wide, make sure you're selected under wide. And let's keyframe up here. And you'll notice that we're on the second frame here. Let's just go to 0. 0, and then hit this button right here. And that, as you see, will keyframe everything for the transform values. And actually, if you drop down the location, so on X axis, we just want to move it a little bit further back so we see these cups maybe on the right side of frame. And it's pretty sensitive, so just something like that. So we just see a little bit of that. And what that does is, instead of moving the camera, then keyframing, it's doing it automatically by moving these numbers here. You are automatically keyframing it. So say, for instance, I wanted to push into here, we can use this X-axis. You'll see it automatically adds our keyframe right there. So you'll see if I press play, we're going to move backwards, which is not what we want to do. I just wanted to illustrate that really quick. Go ahead and select that and delete. And what we're going to want to do is actually just kind of push in, and let's go back to our 500 to the end of our sequence here and the 500 frames. And let's just go in on axis with the X-axis just till we push past the books, maybe somewhere in there. Okay. And this should be a really subtle, slow creep, just like that. So we feel like there's some kind of movement to the shot, and it's a poignant introduction into the scene, right? So that feels pretty good. And now what we want to do is add a subtle rack focus as well. So those are other elements that we can keyframe inside the sequence. We can keyframe our manual focus distance, for example. So let's go to our 0 keyframe, to our starting point here. And let's add this keyframe right here for the manual focus distance. Let's make sure that we are sharp with our draw debug focus plane, and we're not quite there. We can actually move this here, and that feels pretty good. We can uncheck that, and we've changed our manual focus distance. It's almost 400 centimeters, I believe this is in. Yeah. And undo that. Okay. So we have our manual focus is set, and actually we don't want it to be sharp on them. We want to start sharp on the books and the cup here. So let's go ahead and don't use this tab, because that will not keyframe it if you change it here. Use this one over here. So we want to scroll until we are sharp on the books here. And it's a pretty good spot. And then we're going to go to our 500 to the end of a sequence. And I take that back. We're going to just move a little forward, maybe past the books, maybe somewhere in this vicinity. And we can always adjust it. And we're going to make sure we're sharp now on the actors. Now we can bring our draw debug focus plane again and make sure we're there. Okay. Something like that. Let's take a look. Hitting play, slight push, and we're racking in to focus. Okay, not bad. That's pretty much the idea right here. And that's another example of how to add some movement, but also, keyframing other elements of the camera, in this case, focus. I want to point out that this would not be a good way to in order to do this rack focus, you want to make sure you're in manual focus distance, because if we have the tracking and we had it on, let's just say we had the focus tray, we were tracking focus tray, excuse me, try that again. This wouldn't really work. The manual focus distance wouldn't really work because it's tracking our focus tray actor. So just wanted to make sure that you want to be in manual when we're doing these kinds of focus pulls. Okay, so that does it for the wide. Let's add one more camera and we'll do a quick little, this one I'll go kind of a little quicker for, and that'll be our close-up tray. Let's go ahead and click and drag over into the sequence. We have close-up tray. Let's click on the little camera icon so we can look through it, and let's add another, camera move. And by the way, and just to show you how the camera cuts work, before we move on to close-up tray, we want this shot. This is kind of where your editing in engine comes into play, editing your story. This is where the camera cuts right here. So you can right click on here and you can change that shot that we start with with the wide. You'll see the thumbnail didn't change, but we can go ahead and right click, thumbnail, refresh. Now we're on the wide shot. And let's go ahead and look through the camera cuts and go hit play. Make sure we drag this out a little bit more. And maybe somewhere in here is when we'd want to cut into Ziva's close-up. So I'm going to go ahead and drag that down to that point, and we're going to add a new camera cut. So we go ahead over here, camera, click on that and add close-up Ziva. And there we have it. We have our two camera cuts so far. And you'll notice there we are, we're pushing in on her. And now at this point, you just feel this out, but at this point you might want to cut to Trey's shot, or go ahead and add his shot as well. And we haven't keyframed it yet, so it's just locked off. Okay, and you can always change these shots too. You can, like, say if you didn't want the wide to start with, we wanted Ziva's, then there we go. I just switched it to Ziva's by right clicking and just changing the camera. I'm going to go back to our wide. So if you're editing, this could be a quick way of just switching camera shots and all that. But one thing to keep in mind is, because this is a timeline and this is linear, whenever you switch to that shot, that's when you'd want to put the keyframes in. So this case, for example, on close-up trays, when we switch to that shot around frame 311, that's when we want to keyframe his movement, or, slightly before that. So I'll illustrate right now. If we go to our close-up tray shot and make sure we're selected, we'll just do a little tilt down or push in or something like that. We'll keep it very simple here. Let's go ahead and hit S. That keyframes our camera where it is now. And let's scroll forward. Let's actually go to the end here, 500, and let's pilot our camera. And actually, you'll notice that we're not piloting the camera. So let's hit this button right here. Now we can pilot it. And we'll just do something like that for now, for illustration. And hit S again. And let's take a look at our shot really quick, hitting play. There we have it. Okay. And what I like to do is, because this keyframe is just right on top of where the cut is, you'll notice, just drag this out just a little bit before the cut. So there's already movement when we cut into it. Let's check it out. Hitting play back from our wide shot. cut into Ziva. She's delivering her monologue, very interesting. And we cut into Trey. And you'll see that there's still a little bit of a hesitation before we're moving. And I don't really like that. That feels like the cut is waiting for us to get to that camera before it moves. We want to already kind of be moving. So there's a couple things we can do. We can go over here to this keyframe on the close-up tray, and we can right-click it and make it linear. And what that's going to do is it's just, there won't be a ramp up. There won't be a feathering effect on the camera move. It'll just kind of be a linear move. There won't be a slow, and we can do that on the end point as well. And you'll see that now that when we cut into it, we'll already be moving. So there wasn't a feeling of like we're starting back up, and that feels a little bit better for our camera move. And there you have it. Very simply done. We did 3 camera moves. We also looked at the focus and how to rack focus from one object to the next, and how to do all of that stuff with keyframing inside of the sequencer. One last thing I want to do is just make sure we keep everything pretty organized. Let's go ahead and select by hitting Shift, select all 3 of your cameras, and then right-click, move to new folder. And we're going to just make this cameras. And now we have our 3 cameras under that folder. So just so we can keep things clean over here as well. And of course, you can change any of these settings or any of these keyframes at any point. You just want to go into the respective camera. If you wanted to switch the close-up tray shot, say if we wanted to switch it, we don't like this camera move. It doesn't work well, for example. Just go ahead and hit this camera button, and let's drop down our keyframes. We have our 2 triangles here. Let's just make sure we click on one. So now when we're changing it, we're changing that keyframe. And let's just say for demonstration purposes, we wanted to start on a profile for him. So I just moved my camera. Now I'm going to hit S. I'm going to make sure that I'm selected on close-up tray and hit S again. And you'll see that didn't work. So this is tricky sometimes. You want to make sure that you're selected, move around, hit S, and that time it worked. Okay, so we changed the keyframe by making sure we were selected on the keyframe and hitting S again after moving. It can get tricky sometimes. And let's just say our end keyframe also, let's just actually delete that one. And let's make a new one. We're going to just push in on axis here on Trey's shot. We're going to hit S again. Make sure we're selected, hit S. And we just changed our shot. Not a very interesting shot, but I just wanted to show you guys how to do so. So now when we go back to our camera cuts and we pilot that, we've changed our shot up. So there you have it. Now you've got a basic idea of how to use the sequencer, how to add movement to your shots. I'm going to show you on the next module how to do that with a couple more of the built-in in-engine options that we have to